I want to share with you the untold stories of World War II, stories I heard from my grandfather and uncovered through careful research in authentic letters and diaries. Join me as we explore the deepest truths and lesser-known histories of this epic conflict. If you'd like to support me, please consider subscribing to my channel. This is not a story about treasure. This is a story about theft, about lives reduced to inventory, about human beings stripped of everything, their homes, their dignity, their very identities, and melted down into bars of gold. 16% of all Nazi gold came directly from Holocaust victims. Their wedding rings, their dental fillings, their life savings, everything they owned, catalogued, confiscated, and converted into currency. And here's what haunts me. This wasn't random looting. This was systematic, bureaucratic, efficient. The Nazis turned human suffering into profit with the cold precision of an assembly line. So let me ask you, how do you put a price on a life? How do you compensate someone for losing everything, their family, their home, their future? And when the victims are gone, when entire families have been erased, who inherits that debt? This is the story of the material legacy of the Holocaust. The gold, the property, the wealth stolen from millions, and the decades-long struggle to return what can never truly be returned. Let's start in 1933, before the death camps, before the gas chambers, before the world knew what the word Holocaust would come to mean. The persecution began quietly, with laws, with regulations, with bureaucratic efficiency. The Nazis didn't start by killing Jews. They started by making it expensive to be Jewish. Special taxes, blocked bank accounts, forced asset declarations. In 1931, Germany introduced a flight tax, a 25% levy on immigrants who wanted to leave the country with their wealth. It was originally designed to prevent capital flight during the Great Depression, but in 1934, the Nazis revised it specifically to target Jews. Think about that. If you were Jewish and wanted to escape Nazi Germany, you had to pay a quarter of everything you owned just for the privilege of leaving. And if you couldn't pay, you couldn't leave. But the flight tax was just the beginning. In 1938, after Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, Jewish businesses were systematically destroyed. 91 Jews were killed. 7,000 Jewish-owned shops were looted and vandalized. 177 synagogues were burned. And then the Nazis did something truly cynical. They blamed the Jews for the damage. They imposed a collective fine of 1 billion Reichsmarks on the Jewish community, roughly $400 million in 1938 dollars, equivalent to over $7 billion today. The message was clear: we will destroy you, and then we will make you pay for it. By 1939, Jews in Germany and Austria had lost almost everything. Their businesses had been Aryanized, forcibly sold to non-Jews at a fraction of their value. Their bank accounts had been blocked. Their assets had been confiscated. And then the deportations began. Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, the names of death camps that became synonymous with industrialized murder. But before the killing, there was the sorting. When prisoners arrived at the camps, they were told to leave their belongings behind: suitcases, clothing, shoes, eyeglasses, everything. The Nazis called it the Effektenkammer, the effects depot. It was a system designed to catalog, sort, and redistribute everything the victims owned. And I mean everything: watches, jewelry, dentures, prosthetic limbs, even human hair, which was cut from corpses and sold to textile manufacturers. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was left behind. The valuables were sorted by SS personnel and sent to the SS Economic and Administrative Main Office every 3 months. Gold was melted down. Jewelry was appraised. Currency from dozens of countries was counted and deposited. In 1943, the Nazis issued a decree: all property belonging to Jewish, Polish, and Soviet prisoners was to be confiscated and turned over to the Reich. This wasn't theft in the traditional sense. This was state-sanctioned robbery, codified in law and executed with bureaucratic precision. By 1945, the Nazis had accumulated what they called victim gold, gold taken directly from Holocaust victims. Dental fillings extracted from corpses, wedding rings pulled from fingers, religious artifacts stolen from synagogues. A Swiss commission later estimated that victim gold accounted for $146 million of the $400 million in Nazi gold laundered through Swiss banks during the war. That's $1.3 billion in today's money. But here's the thing that makes this even more horrifying. The Nazis didn't hide what they were doing. They documented it. They kept records. They treated stolen property as if it were legitimate state revenue. And banks, Swiss banks in particular, accepted it without question. Switzerland, neutral Switzerland, the country that claimed to stay out of the war while secretly profiting from both sides. Between 1939 and 1945, the Swiss National Bank accepted over $440 million in Nazi gold. About half of it, maybe more, was looted from central banks in occupied countries, and at least $146 million came directly from Holocaust victims. The Swiss National Bank knew. Its governing board was aware, from an early point, that the gold was stolen. They knew it came from victims of the Holocaust, and they took it anyway. Why? Because neutrality was profitable. Switzerland made money by laundering Nazi gold, converting it into Swiss francs and other currencies that Germany could use to buy raw materials from neutral countries. Without Swiss cooperation, the Nazi war machine would have collapsed years earlier. But it wasn't just the Swiss National Bank. Private Swiss banks also accepted Nazi gold, far more than they initially admitted. In 1997, a Swiss commission revealed that private banks had accepted $61.2 million in Nazi gold bars, 3 times what they had originally confessed to. Think about the coldness of that, the professionalism. Bankers in Zurich and Bern, sitting in oak-paneled offices, signing documents, accepting gold bars stamped with swastikas, knowing that those bars were melted down from the belongings of murdered Jews, and for decades they denied it. The war ended in 1945, but the fight for justice was just beginning. In 1947, the U.S. military government in Germany passed Law 59, the first restitution program designed to return confiscated property to Holocaust survivors. It was a start, but only a start. The problem was enormous. How do you return property when entire families have been wiped out, when there are no heirs left to claim it? Since 1952, the German government has paid over $70 billion in compensation to Holocaust survivors and their descendants. That's not a typo, $70 billion. But even that figure doesn't come close to covering the actual losses. In the 1990s, Holocaust survivors began filing lawsuits against Swiss banks, demanding access to dormant accounts and restitution for looted assets. The banks initially resisted, claiming that account records had been destroyed or that claimants couldn't provide adequate documentation. But how do you provide documentation when the Nazis destroyed your family's records, when they burned your home and murdered everyone who could testify? The legal battle lasted years. Investigations revealed that Swiss banks had systematically stonewalled efforts to locate dormant accounts belonging to Holocaust victims. In some cases, banks demanded death certificates for account holders who had been murdered in gas chambers, an impossible requirement. Finally, in 1998, Swiss banks agreed to a $1.25 billion settlement to compensate Holocaust victims and their heirs, but many survivors felt that the amount was inadequate, a fraction of what had actually been stolen. And Switzerland wasn't the only country facing restitution claims. In 2000, Germany established a $4.8 billion fund to compensate forced laborers and other victims of Nazi persecution. The fund was financed jointly by the German government and German companies that had profited from slave labor during the war. In the Netherlands, the government established a restitution commission to investigate confiscated property and return it to rightful owners or their heirs. In the United Kingdom, the government launched the EPCAP, European Programme for Claims Against Property, in 2022, offering £25 million in compensation to Holocaust survivors for property stolen in Nazi-occupied territories. The program ran for 20 years, processing thousands of claims. But here's the uncomfortable truth. No amount of money can truly compensate for what was lost. Let me tell you about a concept called heirless property. It sounds bureaucratic, clinical, but what it really means is this: property that belonged to families who were completely wiped out. Entire bloodlines erased. No one left to inherit. In 2010, 47 countries gathered in Prague and adopted the Terezin Declaration on Holocaust-era assets and related issues. The declaration established guidelines for identifying and returning heirless property. The principle was simple. If a family has no surviving heirs, their property should be used to benefit Holocaust survivors and preserve Holocaust memory. But implementing this principle has been anything but simple. In Eastern Europe, where entire Jewish communities were annihilated, the problem of heirless property is enormous. Buildings, land, bank accounts, art collections, all of it sitting unclaimed because there's no one left to claim it. The World Jewish Restitution Organization, WJRO, has been fighting for decades to recover these assets. They work with governments across Europe, pushing for restitution laws, identifying confiscated property, and advocating for survivors. But progress is slow. Some countries resist. Some claim the property was legally nationalized after the war. Some simply drag their feet, hoping the issue will fade away as survivors die. As of 2025, there are still active lawsuits over art stolen during the Holocaust, still bank accounts that haven't been located, still property that hasn't been returned. And here's the most painful part. Every year there are fewer survivors left to fight for justice. So let's talk about what this gold really represents. It's not just metal, it's not just wealth. Every bar, every coin, every gram represents a life, a family, a future that was stolen, a wedding ring taken from a bride who would never see her wedding anniversary, a gold watch confiscated from a father who would never see his children grow up, dental fillings pulled from corpses and melted down as if human beings were nothing more than raw materials. The material losses are staggering. Economists estimate that the Nazis stole property and assets worth hundreds of billions of dollars in today's money. But even that figure doesn't capture the real loss. Because what the Nazis really stole wasn't gold. It was identity. It was heritage. It was memory. When you confiscate a family's business, you don't just take their income. You erase generations of work, of reputation, of pride. When you loot a synagogue, you don't just steal valuables. You destroy a community's spiritual center, its history, its connection to the past. And when you melt down someone's wedding ring into an anonymous gold bar, you erase the story of that ring. Who gave it? Who wore it? What promises did it represent? Gone. All of it. That's why restitution is so complicated. Because you can return property, you can pay compensation, but you can't restore what was truly lost. The U.S. State Department, in a 2020 report on Holocaust compensation, put it this way: compensation can provide moral recognition and material support, but it cannot undo the damage of the Holocaust. That's the brutal truth. No amount of money, no matter how large, can bring back the dead, can restore the communities that were destroyed, can compensate for the trauma that survivors carry. So what do we do with this legacy? Some argue that heirless property should be sold and the proceeds used to support Holocaust education and remembrance, build museums, fund scholarships, ensure that future generations never forget what happened. Others say that property should be returned to the countries it was stolen from as reparations for the damage done. Still others insist that surviving family members, even distant relatives, have a moral claim to ancestral property, no matter how tenuous the connection. There's no easy answer. Each case is different. Each claim is complicated. Each decision involves weighing justice against practicality, morality against law. But here's what I keep coming back to. This isn't just about the past. This is about the present and the future. When we allow stolen property to remain unreturned, we send a message. Crime pays. Injustice prevails. Might makes right. But when we fight for restitution, when we track down dormant accounts, return confiscated art, compensate survivors, we send a different message. Justice matters. Memory matters. Victims matter. Even when the victims are gone. Let me leave you with this. As of 2025, there are still Holocaust survivors alive. Still families searching for property that belonged to their grandparents. Still lawsuits being filed. Still battles being fought. The UK's EPCAP program, which ran for 20 years, closed in 2022. It was the last major government-sponsored compensation program for Holocaust survivors. The final call for claims has been issued. In a few more years, all the survivors will be gone. And then what? Who will fight for justice when there's no one left to remember the crime? That's why organizations like the World Jewish Restitution Organization continue their work. That's why historians and archivists are racing to document every case, every claim, every story before it's too late. Because the material legacy of the Holocaust isn't just about gold, it's about memory. It's about ensuring that what happened is never forgotten, never minimized, never repeated. So here's my question for you. What should happen to heirless property? Should it be used to fund Holocaust education? Should it be returned to the countries it was stolen from? Should it go to Jewish communities to support survivors and their descendants? And here's the bigger question. Is compensation enough? Or is it merely symbolic? A gesture that can never truly address the magnitude of what was lost? Tell me in the comments, because this isn't an academic debate. This is a real question with real consequences for real people. Every year, fewer survivors remain. Every year, more cases go unresolved. Every year, the window for justice closes a little more. So what do we owe the victims? What do we owe their memory? I'll let you decide, but I'll leave you with one final thought. Gold can be returned. Property can be restored. But the lives that were stolen, those can never be given back. And maybe that's the real legacy of the Holocaust. Not the material loss, but the human loss. Not the gold that was taken, but the people who were erased. The names we'll never know, the stories we'll never hear, the futures that were never lived. That's what the gold represents. And that's what we can never forget.